If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're a fan of Minecraft. Therefore, you've almost definitely heard of the dreaded 2-week phase. But, on the off chance you're unfamiliar with the term, the 2-week phase is a common phenomenon experienced by many Minecraft players. A phenomenon where you find yourself only playing in a world for, you guessed it, 2 weeks. If this is still unclear, the average 2-week experience goes a bit something like this. You decide to start a new world, maybe by yourself, or maybe with some friends. You load into the new world and are taken aback by the beautiful vastness before you. Inspiration hits and thoughts of incredible build ideas start to flood into your head. The possibilities are endless. You slowly, or maybe not so slowly, begin to advance, getting better gear, building a starter base, and maybe even a farm or two. You finally get settled into this new land and begin to think of what to do next, planning some amazing ideas for the future of your world. Slowly, you notice your friends stop playing, and you yourself realize that the itch you had to play when you started the world is slowly fading. Eventually the end nears. Maybe you die and lose all your items. Maybe you get lost in a cave and can't find your way out. Or maybe you simply just don't open the game again after your last session. However the end comes to fruition, it almost always happens around the 2-week mark. But how do we stop this? What can we do to avoid the 2-week phase? Is it even possible? Well, these are all questions I'm hoping to answer for you today. So without further ado, here is how I survived 6 months on one Minecraft world, and how you can too. Tip 1. Have fun. Now, I know this tip is kinda cliche, so that's why I put it first, so we can get it out of the way and get to the good stuff. As cliche as it may be, it is still very important for the long-term success of a Minecraft world. One of the things that makes Minecraft so special is the fact that it can be enjoyed in so many different ways. So, find what is fun about Minecraft for you. Maybe it's building, maybe it's exploration, or maybe you enjoy redstone, or maybe you enjoy something completely different. Find what that is and try to focus on it. If you're doing something you find fun, you'll be more likely to continue to do it. Don't forget, there's also a ton of mods out there made by the brilliant Minecraft community if you find vanilla is just getting a bit too stale for you. Tip number 2. Try to learn something new. As fun and comfortable as it may be to play the game the same way every time, it can be beneficial to broaden your horizons. Try to learn something new. Maybe it's a new building technique, or maybe you want to become more familiar with redstone. The possibilities are truly endless. Fortunately for you, there are tons of tutorials for how to do these things on YouTube. You're only one click away. I personally made it my goal to become better with redstone on my current survival series, and I ended up making an automatic pumpkin pie and rocket factory. I'm also continuously adding new farms to the system, and with each one I'm learning new things about redstone. This has been an incredibly educational and fulfilling project for me, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of the people in the redstone community and the tutorials that they provide. Tip number 3. Take frequent breaks. I get how this tip might sound like the complete opposite of what this video is trying to achieve, but hear me out. Taking breaks are important. In fact, Minecraft even has a splash text that literally says, "Take frequent breaks." But what do I mean by breaks? Well, for me, a break has 2 meanings. The first meaning is to take breaks from projects I'm working on by switching to a different project. I usually try to have multiple projects on the go for this very reason. It allows me to keep things fresh by seamlessly switching between projects when I feel myself starting to get bored or burnt out. An example of this is me switching from my factory project to working on projects in Spawn. And yes, I said projects, as I have multiple ongoing in Spawn, some large, some small. This makes it easy for me to tackle projects based on what I'm feeling like doing that day. The second meaning of taking a break is to step away from the game entirely. As a casual player, it is impossible to expect yourself to play as much as, say, a member of Hermitcraft would play. So take a step back from your computer or console and take a break. Trust me, it'll do you some good to touch grass. I personally find that this time away is when I find the most inspiration to play, and I come up with my best ideas. There's a saying that goes, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder," and I very much believe that to be the case here. When I asked YSL Owen why he experiences burnout, he told me, like anything you do that's fun, it eventually feels like work once you do it long enough. So you need the break, and then when you come back to it, it's fun again. And honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. Tip number 4. Enjoy the early game. In my opinion, the early game is the best part of Minecraft, so enjoy it. At this point in the game, you literally have everything left to do, a whole world of opportunity. One of my favorite things to do in the early game is build. Because there's so much to do, there's a lot of opportunity to build things with functionality and not just for aesthetic purposes. An example of this in my world is the egg house, which I built for the sole purpose of collecting eggs. I got annoyed of having a bunch of chickens in a hole outside my starter base, so I decided to make a small house to keep the chickens. Another more important thing I built in the early game was the community farming area. At the time, I didn't realize how it would end up being such a key piece of spawn, but it now almost acts as an anchor point for our spawn area, while also being a spot to get important farmable items. Lastly, in the early game, the gameplay loop has just started, so there's a lot of game progress to still be made. This is important because in the mid to late game, the gameplay loop becomes less needed and the game becomes more player driven, usually in a creative way, which can be difficult for some people. This brings me to tip number 5. Pace yourself. It's not a race. Like I previously said, when you near the endgame of Minecraft, it becomes a more player driven game than a game loop driven game. So pace yourself. There's no need to get maxed out netherite gear and elytras in the first few sessions. Take pride in the small steps and achievements, and save some of those endgame things for later. Enjoy the ride. I personally decided to forego getting an elytra for a few extra months than I needed to, all because I wanted to enjoy the game without them. I knew that they'd always be there for me to go get, and there was no timer on how quick I needed to get them. This also inspired me to use a different game mechanic, horses, and I actually ended up building a stable, and paths all around spawn because of it. Another thing I stopped myself from getting until recently was netherite tools. Again, I wanted to enjoy the game without them, and save the netherite tool grind for a time where I was a bit bored. This can be a very useful thing to do. Saving things like this for a time when you might be a bit bored or want something to do within the gameplay loop of Minecraft. Even though I got some netherite upgrades, I purposefully left myself with some diamond gear because I knew there would be a time when I wanted to go netherite mining again. So my advice to you is, not everything needs to be done today. You can take your time, and trust me, it'll most likely benefit you in the long run. From my personal experience, when people get maxed out gear, they feel like there's nothing left to do anymore, and they're more prone to not getting back on to play. I'm sure we've all had a friend who, by the second or third session, has basically maxed out their gear and done nothing else, and after showing off how they have the best gear, they just don't get on again. So pace yourself, and enjoy those small steps. There's no timer on how quick you need to finish the game. Tip number 6. Set your goals big, but realistic. We all know that feeling of starting a new world and getting all kinds of ideas of what you want to do. Maybe it's building a huge castle, or an expansive village, or maybe even mining out a whole entire mountain. These ideas are great. Never stop having them, but you do need to be a bit realistic. The issue arises when you come up with an idea for a massive project without thinking of the work that'll need to go into it to make it actually happen. I've been a victim of it myself, having a grand idea, but when the time comes to put that plan into motion, you realize the amount of work you've created for yourself. This can be really demoralizing and even cause you to stop playing because it saps your motivation. That's why you have to set your goals big, but realistic. Again, never stop having these huge ideas, but maybe break them down into smaller, more manageable portions, which can make it more achievable. Finishing these smaller projects can be really fulfilling and can fuel your motivation instead of sapping it. An example of this in my world is my factory. I had a crazy, stupid idea to use the new crafter blocks to create a pumpkin pie factory. I knew that this wouldn't be something I could finish in a single session, so I broke the project down into pieces. I first planned out how I wanted the farm to be. Then I created the pumpkin farms, then the egg farms, and lastly, the sugarcane farm. I then took a break. Eventually, I came back later and added the auto crafting portions of these farms. If I tried to do everything all at once, it probably would have been one of those projects that got left behind. It's never a bad thing to dream big. But why climb Mount Everest when you can instead walk up a few hills and achieve the same product? It all goes back to pacing yourself and taking breaks when you need them. Tip number 7. Set yourself up for success. Another important thing for a long-term world is to create the proper infrastructure to support your projects. Now you might be saying, Dosta, what do you mean creating the proper infrastructure? This is Minecraft, that doesn't make any sense. Well, hear me out. When working on projects, there's always things you're going to need, especially if you're working on big projects. To get these items, you have a couple options. You can either 1. Manually farm or find these items, or 2. Create a farm or an easier way to obtain the items. Here's an example. Say you've had an idea for a project or build and you'll need a lot of glass for it. You might be thinking, well, I'll go manually gather the sand and the fuel and I'll smelt the blocks into glass. And that's great, but what if you undershoot how much glass you need on the first harvest? Well, I guess it's back to mining sand to redo the whole process. Now what if you need glass again for a later project? Time to do it all over again. This takes precious time away from actually working on the project. So, why don't you take that time and instead set up a way to allow yourself to constantly get glass for the duration of your time on that world? Well, how do I do this, you may ask? Well, in this specific case, villager trading, specifically librarian trading. Set up a small villager trading area to allow yourself to get glass whenever you need it. Now I hear you. This is going to take more time to set up than mining sand would take. And yeah, maybe you're right, but if the goal is a long-term world, then taking this time to set up the proper infrastructure will save you time in the long run. Not only will you be able to obtain glass quick and easy, but you'll also now have access to other things like lanterns, name tags, enchantment books, and more importantly emeralds, which you can use to trade for other important items like quartz, food, or even just use the emeralds for beacon blocks. For me, my factory produces my food, rockets, and wood, which are all important but basic items which allow me to continue playing the game quick and easy. So, maybe take some time to set yourself up for success and create the infrastructure you'll need to support a long-term world. Tip number 8. Document your progress. Okay. Now, there's a few ways to go about documenting your progress in a Minecraft world. The easiest way is to periodically take screenshots or pictures of your world. You can also take before, during, and after pictures of a build so you can compare how it looked throughout the whole process. Another way to document your progress is a mechanic within the game itself. Maps. These are very useful tools for getting a top-down image of an area within your world. Some people might also find them a bit easier to do since it's something you can actually obtain and use within the game itself. For me, I have a map room that documents the changes to our spawn area. Every month, I make sure to take maps of the spawn area and use a cartography table to lock them so they don't change. I then put them in item frames and hang them up in our map room. This is a very fun and visual way to see how things have changed over time. Lastly, you can take videos of your world. This, in my opinion, is the best way to see all the changes that have been made, as you can see and compare how every block has changed over time. Taking videos doesn't necessarily mean you need to upload them to YouTube or anything like that, but I find that to be a very fun thing you can do. I personally use all 3 of these techniques to document how my world progresses, and I enjoy looking back and seeing how things used to be versus how they are now. It can give you a really good reminder that even doing the smallest of things can drastically change how your world looks or feels. Tip number 9. Play with friends or a community. Now, this tip may be a bit broad and a bit difficult for some of you to do, but I find playing with friends really helps keep me motivated to play. Seeing them build or create cool things inspires me to also create and build cool things in a way that you just can't achieve on a single player world. But I understand how difficult it is to find friends or a community of players to play with, partially because I've experienced it. I would love to play with a community of people that enjoy Minecraft in a similar way to me, but it's something that's very, very hard to find. I think ideally, for a lot of us, we would very much enjoy playing on a server similar to Hermitcraft or the Empire's SMP, where the player base is dedicated and new things are always happening. But in reality, most people don't play the game this way, and that's okay. My advice to you is try to create something like this for yourself and your friends, and be open to inviting new people to play with you. And finally, tip number 10. Build, build, build. Lastly, for a long-term world, building is key in my opinion. To reiterate, when you get to the end game of Minecraft, the flow of the game is dictated by you. And since the game is a sandbox, creativity is the best way to keep a world alive. So, build as much as you can. Now you might be saying, Dosta, that's easier said than done. I don't know how to build or what to build. And that's okay. I don't want to go into too much detail because I think this topic deserves a video of its own, but building is something you just need to keep doing to get better. Creativity is a muscle, and like any other muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it gets. So just build. If you have a dumb idea, build it. The builds don't have to be massive or super detailed to add something to your world. Start small and work your way up. You'll learn new techniques along the way, and before you know it, you'll be an excellent builder. If you find yourself really struggling, there are tons of tutorials on how to build things on YouTube, and you can just copy these into your world. Although it might not seem like it, even copying builds of other people will teach you techniques. So in the wise words of Shia LaBeouf, do it. Seriously, the worst thing you can do for building or anything else in life for that matter is to not try. So give it a go and have fun with it. So, there are my 10 tips on how to avoid burnout and the 2-week phase in Minecraft. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or even subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Also, I just want to add that all the tips I came up with were generated from my personal experiences or the experiences of my friends. If you feel I missed anything, or you want to add to one of my tips, feel free to do so in the comments. Your insight is super valuable. Additionally, if you want to tell me about your long-term Minecraft world, and why or how you've played it for so long, I'd love to read about it in the comments, so feel free to tell me. Lastly, I just want to give a quick shout out to my friends who gave me their views on this topic. So, shout out to YSL Owen, Raine, and Daco9. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching.